Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MyRIA Compliance Usage webinar. If anyone steady pace, so I will go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to talk about the compliance calendar. If you've been an attendee of these webinars for a while, some of this might be just a refresh for you. If you're newer to RIA in a Box or just haven't been to these webinars too much, then this might be new information. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, the MyRIA compliance calendar is one of the most important parts of the MRC and our software platform. It is where you're going to learn what to do, when to do it, and it logs everything that you do in the compliance log. So if there is one thing that you really get used to and dive into on MRC, let it be the compliance calendar. All right, so as you see here, we are on the home page. Now, you might see a slightly different home page if you are a single person firm. Yours is going to look different than this because you're not going to have any of the supervisory functions, the stuff over on the right that says Reviews and Submissions Manager and so on. So that would be why you're seeing a slightly different screen. Also, if you're on one of our older service platforms, then you wouldn't have quite the same layout here as well, just because you don't have certain components of a newer service level. So compliance calendar, you can get to it two different ways. One way is you can see the compliance calendar summary widget here. You can click go to calendar, or in the drop down here, you can go down to the compliance calendar. One quick note, speaking of the home page, is when you're here, you can see a summary of any recently missed items as well as any upcoming calendar items. You see they go up quite a ways here. Another thing to note, anything with this little arrow here means that that is a missed item. You can still go in and complete those, of course. And anything without that is something that you're still on time for. You can do it in time. These are also all color coordinated in the same way as I will explain to you in the compliance calendar itself. Everything is color coordinated, color coded, I should say, coordinated. It's not wearing stripes with polka dots. All right, let's go ahead and move into the compliance calendar itself. So I'm going to do that using the drop-down menu here. All right, so in front of you, you see a monthly view, which of course is the way that most of us view our calendars. However, if you wanted to, you could view this as a yearly or annual view, or you could view it weekly if you have a whole lot of stuff going on. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the monthly view for the purposes of this tutorial. You also see that right now we are at today. We are in the month of May. If you wanted to go back, see what you've missed, you can do that. If you want to go forward, get a sneak peek of what is to come, you can also do that. Now, all right, let's get into the different activities that you see that you can complete here. So, as I'd mentioned earlier, we have a color-coded system. So everything that's this sort of, I'm going to call it brick. Brick is the closest I can think of to this red. Everything that is this brick color is a required or expected activity. So anything at all that you see that is this sort of red color is something that our compliance experts here think either that you have to do, or at least that is considered a best practice. So when you're audited, it's something that it would be expected that you had completed these activities. Required activities are highlighted in goldenrod. So these are things like performing your annual document attestations, which you see right here. That's something that not only is it a best practice, it is required by statute. So you want to make sure that you are doing those. Now, just because something that's required is on a certain day doesn't necessarily mean that it's required to be done on that day, however, unless you see that that is actually locked in to that day. You can do that at any time during the year. It's just, for instance, like I mentioned with attestations, it's annual. Other things like with transactions and holdings reports, you're going to also be doing annually, transactions, quarterly. Anything like that, though, if you see it highlighted in goldenrod, you do need to make sure that that's something you're doing and recording on the compliance calendar. So let's go ahead and actually get into something, and we can take a look. Oh, and actually, sorry, I forgot to keep going with the color coding. The other two types here, as they state, educational in green, those are going to be primarily our webinars, and custom activities are black and white. Those are anything that you create, so you can add anything you want to the calendar. All right, I just heard that the background noise in my office is being heard, so I'm just gonna kind of loudly say that in my office, that people are hearing you guys on the webinar. Cool, thank you guys for letting me know. Sorry, we have an open office concept here, so sometimes there's a little bit of background noise, but I just shamed them, so that should kind of fade. Sorry about that. All right, here we go. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at just a couple of activities. First, we'll take a look at an activity in the future. Let's look at books and records down here on May 28th. So when you open this up, you'll see that you get a brief description here. It says, this is your firm's Q2 2019 client books and records review. Ensure that the firm has both obtained required records from clients and provided required disclosures to clients. So you're getting just a little bit of information there. It's enough information if this is something that you're accustomed to doing. However, if you haven't done this before, you wanted more information on what exactly you needed to do, our compliance team has also compiled all of the information that you could need in order to get that books and records review done. So you'll see if you click and expand that, you have just a ton of information here. And that's going to be the case for any item that you need to complete. So when you complete that, you can add any notes that you want to add here. You can attach any applicable files here and mark as complete. One thing to note is if you're completing it on a date that is not this date, once you hit mark as complete, it's going to ask you what date you completed that. So right now it's assuming it's being completed on May 22nd, even though it's scheduled for May 28th because it is May 22nd. If you completed in the past, you could also click set date and change that to the past. So that's just so you know that you don't need to go in every time and edit the date before you complete it. It will ask you that as a part of the completion process. So we would go ahead, mark that as complete. Yep, we did it today. Good for us, 6 days early. And you'll see that since we completed it on May 22nd, it moved that up to May 22nd. So you'll see that, you'll see the check mark, and you'll know that you're good to go there. Now, let's say that you wanted to go in and complete something that you've missed. So for instance, you missed doing your disaster day. So let's go to May 1st, and you see that you missed that. You'll see that instead of mark as complete, it will show the option to amend the activity. And that you'll click on amend activity, and by clicking on that, it just refreshes it as though you hadn't missed it. So then you're still able to go in, add your notes, add your files, do whatever you need to do, mark as complete, and again, you'll be able to set that date for whatever the date was. So maybe you did complete it on May 1st, you just forgot to mark that you had done it, so you would be able to do that. So here I'd say set date, May 1st, great. And there you go, disaster day completed on May 1st. And just so you know, I do see a couple of questions coming in. I will be looking at all questions at the end, just so that this doesn't get fragmented. I'll go back and look at those. Anything that I can answer right now, I will do so, or at the end of the webinar. Anything that requires a little further research, I'll get back to you about. All right, now let's see. I did see one just now. If you, and actually it was something I was going to talk about. So it was another option that you have here. So let's see, let's go into passwords update. So someone was asking how you would dismiss an activity. Now, there are a couple of things to think of here, because the question that our asked actually was, how do you dismiss an activity if it's not applicable to your firm? Now, first off, one thing to note is that most things that you see are going to be applicable to your firm, kind of whether or not you know it, because these are things that are in here as best practices for a firm with your characteristics, because when this is set up for you, it is set up with your firm characteristics in mind. Now, one step beyond that, though, is that in compliance settings, I'm going to show you in just a little bit how you would set things up if there were things in there that you didn't want to do, that you wanted to do more often, less often, whatever the case may be. You'll be able to do that in compliance settings. So if there is something on your calendar, you can dismiss it on a one-off basis, but you can also go ahead in compliance settings and address that so that it's not coming up constantly if it is something that isn't applicable to you. One other thing to note is that if you have this in single person firm mode, same thing, and the things that are listed there should only be applicable to you as a single person firm. So if you think that you're seeing things that really aren't, you can always reach out to us and let us know. It's always possible that either there's something in the way that the audit process is conducted that you don't know about that our compliance experts have decided this should be done as a result of, or maybe you've noticed something that, we have and really doesn't apply to your type of firm, and that's really good for us to know too. So always feel free to reach out if that's the case. But just to show you quickly, if you wanted to dismiss something, you'd come in here, dismiss activity. I'm going to ask you if you're sure. Yes, you're sure. Go ahead and dismiss the activity. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to actually take it off of my calendar, but that is how that would work. All right. So let's take a look at some other things that you can do in here. So you can do everything, as it is. Completing things on the, day that they're meant to be completed, or setting whatever date you actually completed it, or you can change due date. So if you saw something and you were like, oh, passwords update, I don't really want to do that. Now we normally update our passwords every year in November. You could go ahead and you could amend that activity if you thought already marked it as complete, but normally it would show up like this, and you could go ahead and edit the date. And that's what you're going to do if you are looking at something and you're thinking, oh, this just isn't when we do this. So normally our firm completes this in November. So I want to say that November 1st, we're going to go ahead and we are going to update our passwords. So that is what you would do there. And I'm discarding my changes because I don't actually want to keep this there, but you would hit save changes if you wanted to move it to November. The other thing that you can do in here that is customized to you is creating a custom activity. So in order to create a custom activity, you would go ahead and click the plus sign right next to custom activity, and you would enter an activity name, set a date, and add a description. You can also make a recurring activity if this is something that is going to recur for your firm. It can recur weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, or never would be a strange thing to check if you wanted it to recur. But that is an option there. You can also, just like everything that you are already doing with the items that we have existing on the calendar, you can schedule this exactly how it works for your firm. So the second Monday of the 7th month of the year. So the second Monday in July every year, this would happen. All right, so that is how you use the compliance calendar. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple different things that will help you more understand how to customize this. All right. Sorry, I'm seeing a lot of questions over here. And again, I am going to go back and answer these at the end because some of these are part of what I'm already going to be discussing with you, so I don't want to jump all over the place. All right, so in order to change things on more than just a one-off basis, you're going to want to go into your compliance settings page. Now, scroll past users, and here we are at the compliance calendar. So this is what I was talking about with how if you want to change the due date of an activity once, sure, go ahead and do that in your compliance calendar. But if you're wanting this to always happen in a different way, either more frequently, less frequently, in a different month and a different day, that's when you'd want to go into your compliance settings. If you haven't done so, it's a good idea to go ahead and open up your P&P manual and see what you say in there, because these are all best practices. If you were to revert to the default settings, which you can see you can do here, then that's what our compliance team thinks you're probably going to do. That's probably what the best practices are going to be for your firm. But your firm lays out exactly what it does in its P&P manual, so that's what you can kind of use as a reference guide when you're setting these up, if you don't know off the top of your head how often you say you do these things. So let's look here at, best execution review. All right, so right now it's assigned to anybody. You can assign it to a different supervisor within the firm if you want, if there are multiple of you and you want certain tasks to be assigned to one of you and not the other, it'll show up on that person's calendar. Frequency you can change, and the timing. So let's go ahead and click into it. So as you can see, the activity is assigned to, we could have it be assigned to John or Derek, or right now, anybody. That means either of you can complete it. Frequency, you'll note that we have it set to quarterly, but there is a dark circle around annually, and that bubble is a little bit bigger. As you see down here, that's the recommended frequency. So if you were to revert to those default settings, that is what it would be. Now, it doesn't mean that annually is what you have to do. It just means that that is what we assume you would do. That's the recommended frequency. Quarterly, if your firm works better that way, great. If that's what it says in your P&P, definitely choose quarterly. The next line is where you can be more specific about exactly when you want it to occur. Right now, just so you know, the dates that we have set are not based on we think that the second Wednesday of July is the best date to do this. It's because if we were to have everything that is annual all come at once, December 31st would be a very painful day for everyone. So because of that, these are scattered throughout the year in such a way that it makes it possible to complete them as they're occurring, instead of seeing, 45 things suddenly pop up on the last day of December. So you can change this. Unless it's something that's locked into a date, it doesn't need to be. So let's say that we wanted to change this to the third Wednesday of the second month of the quarter. Great. Or, as I was just mentioning, use automatic distribution option. That's what has automatically occurred for everything so far. And so you could choose that. All right. Save changes. Great. And it will let you know what you changed. We changed the timing of future activities. Confirm changes. All right. Great. So you can do that with anything in here. If you have any problems doing this, any questions at all, feel free to reach out to your client advocate, or if you're on a level of service where you have a compliance expert, you can always reach out to them as well, and they'd be happy to help you figure this out. All right, now let's go back to our compliance calendar. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that there are a couple of ways that you can let your compliance calendar be more a part of your everyday calendar checking life. One of those that is very useful if you find that you wish that you were thinking of these things, but you just don't log into MRC enough, and so you're not seeing your compliance calendar, you're ending up with missed activities. One thing that you can do is set up a calendar feed. So the way that I got to that list is you go up to the top right-hand corner of your compliance calendar, click here, And you can see here it says go to settings. That's where we just were, compliance settings. Go to the compliance log. That's where anything is going to be recorded. So the third thing here, set up calendar feed. This is an iCal feed that is set up for whatever calendar you're normally using. If you're using Google Calendar, you're using Outlook, you would use this URL here, and you would be able to add a feed of the titles of these tasks on the days that they are listed. So for instance, in Outlook and Google, I know that both of those, if you go into your calendar, there's an option titled Add Calendar or Add a Calendar, and that's where you would enter this URL and you would be able to set that up. Again, if you have any issues doing that, your client advocate, glad to help. Top right, again, set up integration partners. We have integrations available with the following CRMs with Redtail, Wealthbox, and Salesforce. So you can integrate and sync those as well. So if you have your login details for those, that's how you would do that here. If you have any issues with that, again, reach out. All right, that is all that I have on my docket for today. So if you'd give me just a moment, I'm going to go ahead and look through the questions that we have. And if you're thinking of any questions in the meantime, please feel free to go ahead and type those in. All right, I've gotten a couple questions about the webinar, the completion of webinars, and I know that is something that some people have found tricky to do, and I have never actually attempted to mark that as complete. I apologize. So I will look into that and get back to you. If you find that you're having issues marking those off, please let me know. From what I understand, if you watch it live, it should autocomplete at the end of the webinar for you. And if you watch it at a later date, I believe that there is an option when you're watching that to mark that as complete. I know that you can't just go into the item itself, as you'll see here, and mark it complete, but it is something that auto completes as a result of attending or watching the webinar. That's the same way that things like our status monitor auto completes if you mark that as complete in MRC, things like that. Same thing with parts of the renewal process. If you're finding that isn't happening for you, please do either let me know here in the questions or reach out to your client advocate, and we'll try and figure out what it is that's going wrong in that process. All right, let's see. What other questions do we have here? I got a question, I'm assuming when I was looking at the passwords update, as to what passwords is this talking about. That I don't know for sure exactly, just because I'm not, again, a compliance person. But in general, I would assume this has to do with any passwords that you use in your firm. It is generally a good practice to update your passwords on a regular basis, and I'm assuming that that is what this is meaning. So if you have any further questions on that, feel free to reach out. And again, if you look in your P&P, it should list any specifics that have to do with your firm as far as that's concerned. But my assumption would be that this has to do with any passwords that you're using in your day-to-day work life that would have some impact on your clients. So there you go. All right. How do you dismiss an activity? We already went over that one. All right. And then we had the question about how to change the frequency of a recurring activity. That is an expected activity, not a custom activity. So hopefully that was clear enough. You go into the compliance settings, and that is where you would do that. Another person said that you don't have access to any of these tools. If you don't have access to these tools, then you are on one of our other, our older platforms, most likely. And in that case, you could just reach out to your client advocate, and they would put you in touch with someone from our sales team who would be able to kind of walk you through what you would be able to access if you were to update or upgrade your what am I thinking of? What is the word? If you were to update the plan that you are in to a basic or professional, which are two more recent platforms. All right, let's see. Looking through these questions. All right, interesting. Okay, well, Shannon mentioned here that the webinars used to automatically get marks completed when you attended the live webinar, but that changed late last year. That is great to know. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring that up with our dev team here and see what is going on with that and make sure that we get that back to a place where it is not so frustrating. Sorry that that has been occurring. All right. Let's see. Another question here. So now, when you upload a new PNP or code of ethics, do we adjust your compliance calendar activity frequency, or is that your job? That is something you would want to do. I would say if you're on the professional level, you could reach out to your compliance consultant, of course, and see, especially if they helped you with creating that, if they know that there are a few things that you're going to need to change in there, they might be able to help you out with that. But otherwise, if you have updated your PNP, just try and, keep track of the changes that you've made, and then you can go in, see which parts have changed, update accordingly. All right, let's see. Oh, great. Janelle mentioned that the calendar feed will be helpful. Great, perfect. That's why we have it. Hopefully, yeah, if this is something that, you want to make sure is on your radar more often, I think the best way to do that is to go ahead and set up that calendar feed, because I think, everyone looks at their Outlook calendar every day, but it's not every day that you log into MRC, unless it is every day, in which case, congratulations on being a great compliance expert. All right, let's see. Is there a way to get trained on how to do these various reviews? Let's see. All right. Well, when we're looking at the different reviews, I would say if you're on our basic level, of course, something like, training in a compliance matter is something that you would have to kind of reach out to your client advocate, see whether that's something that they understand and could give you resources about. If you're on a professional level, you could always reach out to your compliance expert, and they would be able to help you out further. With any of these items for review, something like annual client suitability and performance review, for instance, it is really detailed very well in the more information text. And so I recommend just reading over that. You should be able to glean what it is you need to do as part of that process from reading that further information. It really is very detailed. All right. I apologize for my slowness. Just have to get through these questions. All right. It looks like I have every question. If I missed your question, I apologize. I didn't intentionally skip over anything this time. Everything seemed pretty suited for the group. Oh, let's see, I have a new one. All right, so one question was asked just on the default calendar items and their related settings. How do we determine what's best for the firm? That is something that the compliance experts, when they were putting all of this together, they went over, the best practices, what's expected when your firm gets audited, what it would be expected that you had been doing during that time. And yes, further on that, it would depend on, if you're a single person firm, you're going to be seeing certain settings. If you have users, you're going to be seeing certain settings. If you're SEC versus state registered, that's going to be different as well. And those are the main areas in which you're going to see the differences, because those are the things that would differ based on whether you're a single person user, whether you're expected to perform supervision, whether you have SEC or state requirements. And so those are the things, the primary things that I know of that would be determining what you would be seeing and the frequency that would be expected. All right. I think that's it. Thank you for sitting through all of those questions. There were a lot this time. Thank you for your involvement and engagement. That is always appreciated. All right. I think that is going to be it for today. And of course, I didn't do this while you were thinking of your questions. So let's see. There we are. There is the picture of my cat that I'm sure that, yes. Oh, good. Kyle asked about the picture of my cat. I knew that was an important part of these webinars. Well, this is kind of an oldie but a goodie. I rotated back to this picture of Livy. My cat's name is Livy. You might not even know that. Oh, how unprofessional of me to have not told you. This is Livy, just sending out her rays of judgment and love, as always. And she's here watching over all of us in our compliance tasks. So thank you so much for joining me today. And if you think of any other questions, feel free to reach out to your client advocate. They are experts in the compliance calendar and can answer any questions that you do have. And I, again, will be reaching out to figure out what is going on with the autocomplete of the webinar task and why that's not happening. And I apologize that has been impacting you guys. So I will make sure that gets taken care of. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your week. Bye.